We promised a middle-class tax cut leading to over $800 of savings for two-income households. We're acting today on that so that by July 1st, as promised, that middle-class tax cut that will reduce taxes for the 22 million Canadians who pay federal income taxes, that tax cut will take into effect. It's my pleasure on behalf of the Cabinet to sign this order to deliver that tax cut.
Prime Minister Mark Carney wants to get his promised middle-class tax cut through Parliament before Canada Day, but his Finance Minister, François-Philippe Champagne, will only have really a few weeks to get the job done before the House rises for the summer. Champagne also had this to say about the possibility of tabling a budget in the next month.
Will you table a budget before summer?
So what we have today is a middle-class tax cut. That's step one. Step two, you're going to have a throne speech where we'll outline the Canadian government priority, and there will be a fall economic statement to follow. So those are really the sequence that you're going to see.
The front bench is back to talk about what Parliament could look like and some of the strategies behind what you just heard. Sharon Carr, Jamie Ellerton, Graham Richardson, and Nick Nanos. Sharon, I'll start with you, and I want to start on the budget. Again, you were a big part of Bill Morneau's office. The Liberals are saying no budget, just a fall economic statement. The Conservatives are criticizing them for that not being very transparent. Your take?
Okay, well, I want to start with the logistics perspective of this first, because you just had an interview with a Conservative MP, John Brassard, I believe, and I want to talk about the logistics before I get into some of the partisanship that he brought up. Now, the Cabinet was sworn in yesterday. It's been just over 24 hours, and the outrage about there not being a budget, to me, is a bit mind-boggling. There's a statutory requirement that requires a budget to happen by a certain date. We are in the coming towards the end of May. There's no way a budget could happen right now because people are not even sworn into their offices or as MPs. It's just bananas to think that that is their argument, that we need to have a budget right now. But putting aside the actual logistics and common sense factor of why there isn't a budget right now, because we just had a cabinet sworn in yesterday, you don't need a budget to get things done. We saw today an executive order type decision made on the middle class tax cut. Now, we heard the honourable member from Barrie kind of spew out a whole bunch of rhetoric and nonsense around why there needed to be a budget, for there to be accountability and for there to be a plan. Well, my lovely colleague over there, no, you don't actually. We have a fall economic statement that will come in, and fall economic statements are often, or fiscal updates are often referred to as mini budgets. You can put as much or as little spending in as you want. So things don't need to go in a budget to get done. There are other things that can be put in place that can substitute that. So I think that if that's the argument that they're going to make, that you have to have a budget to do anything, they're going to wedge themselves into a corner, because when the House gets back and there's a vote on this middle class tax cut and they decide not to do it, it's them that's going to look absolutely horrible. But that was just the most ridiculous interview I've ever seen, and bless your heart, Vashi, for putting up with that.
Jamie, your thoughts on, I mean, the issue around transparency, I take Sharon's points for sure, but they did promise a lot during the campaign, and this is one of the first years outside of COVID we won't have a budget.
Yes, I didn't see the previous interview, Vashi, so I can't comment on what Sharon just said and kind of going off on that. But I would say it's kind of sounds to me like a curious misstep for this government. I get it that you're not going to have a budget ready next week, but Parliament hasn't been sitting for 6 months. There's a massive Department of Finance, and there's a team there that is constantly preparing these things and looking for options in what is there. So I don't see why this government couldn't extend the spring session and sit into the summer to get a budget passed. They don't want to, because it's not going to be politically expedient. They know the numbers are going to change, as they knew they were going to change when talking about the tariff response was going to be in the middle of the winter. And so it sounds like they would rather kick a political football down the road so they don't have to pin the number on the donkey to be held to account to later. They want the headline of a middle-class tax cut. I suspect the Conservatives are going to support that because they actually campaigned on an even larger one. But the actual day-to-day machinery of government and how money flows and how it's getting out the door, Treasury Board's role and how it's being allocated, and accountability for how money has been spent is a huge function of what legislatures do in Parliament. And by denying Parliament that capability, it's essentially going to be a PMO knows best kind of approach to this. And I would just go back. I mean, I suspect Sharon was in Minister Morneau's office when they decided to punt on not having a budget in the early days of COVID. And that caused a lot of political uproar and a political headache for the government.
We had to do that.
And so I see we'll see how this one plays out politically. Right now, it's an Ottawa story. Yes, the middle class tax that's going to be there,
I want to get
but
the other
I think there's more there.
Can I say one thing really quickly?
No, Sharon, sorry. I honestly have 3 minutes. I got to get the other two panelists in. My apologies. I think I'm going to split the difference, Graham. A little column A, a little column B. I think logistically it is a challenge. They could sit longer, but it is, I think what Sharon says is correct about logistics. I think Jamie is also correct that there's a political imperative not to lay it all out right now either.
Yeah, nice down the middle. I'm the same way. And it is a very inside story, I think. It's important. I think budgets are important. I like budgets. I liked covering them, and because you got to see the guts of government. At the same time, I'm not making apologies for them, but you count the leadership race and the election and the cabinet and the Pope and the King, and like there's a lot going on here, and just throwing out a budget, they could be accused of being reckless and not really being serious about it. And how real are those numbers? But they'll take the fire for it. It's early days. How much fire will they take? I'm skeptical whether it's going to be intense.
Come on, like if the shoe was on the other foot, do you think the Conservatives would be, focused on introducing a budget as opposed to a tax cut to Canadians? This is
well, you can do both. And the Conservatives in 2011 did, a month after the election, introduce a budget.
But this is, I think this is trap number one that the Conservatives have fallen into, because the Conservatives are talking about process. Can I tell you something? Canadians don't care about process. They want a tax cut, right? And I'm sure the Liberals would be happy for the Conservatives to continue talking about the process and why don't we have a budget and why are we doing all these other things, and then the Liberals are going to monomaniacally keep saying we're delivering a tax cut to middle class Canadians and everybody's going to get it, and yes, we'll get to the budget when it's necessary. So I think this is a win for the Liberals, and the Conservatives. It's like bringing a knife to a gunfight. Oh, we don't like the process. Like, come on.
Okay, I lied. I actually have a minute, so I can split 30 seconds between Jamie and Sharon. Sharon, go. You got 30 seconds.
Well, I feel like Nick just said it all for me. But listen, there is so much that is going to be done. And I know the Conservatives want to talk about getting a budget out there. But if we even go back and look at the Conservatives' platform and look at where they were going for, their entire platform was planned based on unicorns and butterflies and amazing situations, whereas the Liberal platform actually looked at the worst-case scenario with tariffs. So now let these ministers come into place.
No, it didn't.
Let them come into place.
I love you, but it didn't.
Let them come into place and get their mandate letters out and decide how they're going to do it. We might not all agree on the platform and how it did it, Vash, but it's not as bad as the Conservative platform.
It did, okay, that I won't. I don't know what the argument is. Like I can't make that decision. I will say both parties did not factor in the economic impact of the trade war. Nobody was upfront about that on both sides. Last 30 seconds to you, Jamie.
Yeah, listen, I think this is still very early days. I think this is a kind of weird one where they could definitely put forth a budget. All these things are always subject to change. For Mr. I'm going to run the economy, I balanced a budget, I've done all these stuff, to essentially punt on his first financial document for political expediency is a curious mixed message to send for a guy who said that he's the savior for this exact reason.
I like Nick's point, though. I don't know if anybody would be throwing together a budget now. I don't know. I mean, all the numbers were a little wild, so we shall see. Okay.
The host gets the line of the panel. I love you, but no, it didn't.
I do love her.
I love you, Vash.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Sharon Carr, Jamie Allerton, Graham Richardson, and Nick Nanos, our front bench.